Hey, good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, your Sunday morning news and politics show for the Hoosier State without all of the MAGA BS, gaslighting, and false equivalency. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I'm broadcasting from Bloomington, and someone got new glasses. Hey, real quick before we get going here, just a quick bit of housekeeping. If you're watching there on the Project Next YouTube feed, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you get notifications. If you're on Facebook Live, are you following? Be sure you're doing that. And hey, also check us out on Twitch. Subscribe if you're over there. As for me, you can find me on all the social medias now at Who's Left or at who'sleft.us. Bringing all my branding together, getting those accounts in order. That covers that. Now, let's welcome our panel. Coming back to the show, one of our favorites, there is Leslie Nuss. Hello, Leslie.
Hi there. Hi, Scott. How are you?
Oh, just another week under the fire hose, right?
Yeah, I agree.
It's wild out there. And another friend of the show, longtime favorite, there is Indianapolis City County Councilor Jesse Brown. Welcome, sir.
Always an honor to be here. Great to see you both.
Love to have you. And we've got a newcomer. Let's induct Ryleigh Beckett into the Who's Left This Week Hall of Fame.
Good morning.
Welcome, Ryleigh. Glad to have you on board this week and look forward to your contribution. So let us begin here in Indiana with a quick trip through the headlines in a segment I like to call Around the Corn. So we found out this week that homicides and other violent crime are down in Indianapolis by nearly 30% in the first 6 months of this year compared to the same period last year. That is according to new national crime data. Indianapolis's drop is consistent with many of the nation's large and mid-sized cities, reinforcing a broader decline in violent crime since the pandemic surge. Jesse, does the data basically comport with what you're seeing there in the Circle City?
It definitely comports with what we're seeing actually living in the Circle City. It does not comport with what we are seeing in the way the media portrays the Circle City, especially the right-wing media.
Well, if it bleeds, it leads, right?
Exactly right. I mean, to a certain extent, but then also I spend way too much time on twitter.com. It's evil, probably shouldn't do that, but I do it because I can engage with people who have very different political ideas than me. And I chatted with a person who works for IMPD, this is before the 2024 election. He was explaining how the high crime rates were why, we needed to vote for Trump. And I had to get him to pull up the FBI stats to prove that what he was saying was just total nonsense. And he was like, wow, I'm just genuinely shocked by that. I was like, okay, and you are a police officer. So you have access to the raw data, but you're letting the spin dictate your view in reality. And we see in Washington, D.C., what that does. It justifies all sorts of ridiculous militarism, et cetera, and police actions. But I think that Democrats and lefties would do really well not to minimize the existing crime, because it's still, kids are still shooting kids over drama. There's very real violence and crime. None of it is tolerable, and we have to keep working on lowering that. But we just need to point out that it's not sending in a bunch of, SWAT teams with assault rifles that lowers crime. It's providing community centers. It's giving people economic mobility. And so we just need to insist that crime is intolerable, and that's why we need our programs, right? That's my little soapbox for the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to handle that stuff upstream. But also this week, we find that the Indiana National Guard is partnering with Saudi Arabia. So under the Department of Defense's the Department of Defense's State Partnership Program, say that 5 times fast. This partnership includes the Indiana National Guard, the Oklahoma National Guard, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This program pairs American states and foreign nations to enhance relationships and promote defense and security cooperation objectives established by the U.S. and its partners. So apparently the Indiana National Guard's experience in disaster relief, domestic operations, and overseas missions will support the U.S. government's ongoing diplomatic development and security efforts to achieve shared goals. That is the diplomatic speak coming from the Daily Journal, where that story we found. Leslie, what is the Indiana National Guard doing partnering with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia?
I don't know, but strengthening ties with more autocratic regimes and ones that don't support human rights. Personally, if it was up to me, I would want to partner with the Scandinavian countries like Denmark or Finland, and where people are treated more equally. And I think that's the whole problem with what we're seeing right now in our state and our country is this partnership and this admiration for more dictatorships or authoritarian countries like Hungary and Turkey and Russia, when we should be looking towards Denmark and Finland and Norway and Sweden, where women have more equality and people have universal health care. Those are the people that I would want to partner with. So I find it a little
as
bit
a
weird.
parent, it's like this is like when your kid starts hanging out with a new friend group, and I feel like the United States is not hanging out with the best friend group these days. So Ryleigh, did you see this one? There were Nazis hanging out in Indianapolis last weekend. This from the Indy Star. So there were fewer than a dozen members of this Nazi hate group walking the streets of downtown Indianapolis last weekend, and the police drove alongside them. Now, that visual did not sit well with a lot of people. In an August 17th statement, IMPD Chief Chris Bailey pointed to the Constitution to understand why his department responded the way they did. He says, quote, safeguarding First Amendment rights, even for those whose views we find reprehensible, is a responsibility we take seriously. But let me be clear, protecting those rights is not an endorsement of those beliefs. Not now, not ever, end quote. Is that a sufficient defense from Chief Bailey, do you think?
So it's a weird thing to say, but I do think he's right, because it is unfortunately free speech, and it is protected under the Constitution. And if you start divvying up the Constitution and be like, oh, well, we're going to protect this types of free speech, we're only going to protect this types of free speech, then you have the opportunity to start limiting yourself and for that to be returned on you. So I think that he is correct in saying it is free speech. We have to protect it, but it doesn't mean that we're agreeing with him or that it's right or morally good. I was actually downtown when this happened, and I don't live downtown. And they weren't out there for very long, because in the 5051 signal, we were talking about it, and people went outside immediately and started looking for them to warn people, to find out where they were, and they were gone like within minutes of them being reported. So they weren't out there for very long. These proud, brave boys with their masks and trying to invoke fear, I don't think they're very brave at all.
Listen, I saw some of these guys. They didn't look like they were in too great a shape. They probably couldn't have walked for very long. Yeah, that march didn't last too long. They're right to the donut shop and they're done. Here's another one in central Indiana. Jesse, I don't know if you saw this one, how much you drive south of town, but at the Marion-Johnson County line, there is a 14 by 48 foot digital billboard just off the right shoulder of the interstate saying, "Attention criminals, cross this line, you'll do more time." And that phrase is sandwiched between photos of Johnson County Prosecutor Lance Hamner and Sheriff Dwayne Burgess. Is this just like tough guy posturing?
Yeah, it's just like the last thing I talked about, right? So it's talking about optics, it's talking about this imagined view. Like, first off, who self-identifies as criminals? It's like, oh man, my Hamburglar costume is still in my trunk. How'd they catch me? Like no one thinks of themselves first and foremost as a criminal. Who is this billboard appealing to? And it's not criminals, of course. It's to people who already have this preconceived notion that Marion County is not tough on crime, et cetera. Like, say what you want about law and order. Like, I think we need way fewer people arrested and way lower sentences. But even if you disagree, you have to look at the fact that Indianapolis and Marion County have people incarcerated who are arrested all over the state. And we also have people here that are shipped here because they're indigent, and all the rural counties, like, I don't know, we don't have any social programs. go to Indianapolis. They'll take care of you. And we know desperation feeds crime. So it's once again just playing into this narrative that the big city liberals are just like delighting in crime running free because we love criminals here. It's just nonsense to anybody who would like sit and have a real conversation. But it's the type of nonsense that they think plays well with their base. So we're going to see more of this.
Yeah, it really kind of plays into that. Oh, the city is big and scary, and out here in the suburbs, we're tough on crime.
Right.
Right. And the last quick headline I wanted to look at before we dive deeper into some stories here is this one. Can't escape Todd Rokita any given week. This time, a story from Fox 59. So Rokita announced his office will review all state government contracts to determine if private businesses practice DEI requirements with their employees. He said that DEI practices, quote, treat people differently on the basis of race and sex when recruiting, hiring, promoting, and conducting other employment activities. So, State Senator Greg Taylor, a Democrat from Indianapolis, responded by saying, this is getting into the actual day-to-day operations of small businesses in the state of Indiana that want to include parts of their staff that the state doesn't see as so important. That should be a private business decision. We've got national businesses that want to do business here in the state of Indiana, and if they decide that they don't want to do business here in the state of Indiana, it could have a chilling effect on our people and the amount of bids we receive. Ryleigh, did you see this from Rokita this week? You there?
Yeah, you cut out. Could you repeat that for me? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. What are your thoughts on this announcement from Rokita, and what do you say about Taylor's response?
So I think that whenever you start to implement legislation or rules about minute details of people's lives or their abilities to enact their private business, then you open yourself up to that being returned on you. We talked about before we went live about there are nonprofits who are being affected by this because they're having to rewrite their grants to be inclusive language or not have gendered language. But then you have organizations like women's domestic violence shelters that are having to rewrite their grants to have non-gendered language, but it removes them from only serving a targeted population. So again, I think it's very interesting and unfortunate that the party of small government is trying to dictate people's lives and their actions and just their business, literally.
Yeah, and actually stick a pin in government getting intimately involved with business, because we're going to come back to that later on in the show. So I do want to move on to some more in-depth stories, and it continues this week that the top political story in Indiana is this redistricting push from the Trump administration. All of Indiana's Republican Congress members this week lined up in a row behind Trump and said they're in favor of this. And Leslie, I sort of want to start with you, because if we go through with this gerrymander that all of the Republican caucus from Indiana is on board with, it seems that your Congressman Frank Mervan is their most likely target. They may be able to gerrymander Andre Carson out of his seat if they are especially aggressive, but it seems like Mervan's the real target. How does that make you feel?
Well, I think it should be alarming to everybody. We do not want to live in a one-party state. Even Governor Braun said that 88%, I don't know if 88 is true or if 88 is a dog whistle, but of local offices are held by Republicans. And that is just, it shouldn't really be like that. It should be more equal, because we're not getting government for the people. We're getting government for the people who want power the most. I am actually playing my first political fundraiser. I'm going to be performing on Tuesday for Frank Mervan. He's a very popular congressman. And yeah, I don't think that they should be picking their voters. Voters should be picking their Congress people. And so it is just, I mean, and they've already been doing robocalls and lying and saying that it's Democrats when, come on, I mean, we got to get the people to wake up. It's the war to make the lies true. It is the war to make the lies true. They're lying, they're lying, they're lying. And we've got to, fight back against the lies.
Indiana was blue in 2008. I don't know why they're thinking that they have total majority control. Indiana was blue in 2008, and then they gerrymandered the maps in 2010, and then Indiana was red in 2012, and then they gerrymandered the maps again. And so they're pot kettling here, saying, "Oh, they're manipulating the maps."
Yeah, we have 9 congressional seats in Indiana. 7 of which, that's 77%, if I remember my math, are held by Republicans in a state where I believe we vote in our congressional elections something like 55-45 or 60-40. This state is a lot more purple and diverse than what we are painted as. And if we had some sort of fair maps, it would be like 5-4 or 6-3 at the worst. Leslie said something about making the lies true, and I want to point to a quote from 3rd Congressional District Representative Marlin Stutzman, who wrote Monday on X, quote, "Democrats have proven they will use every tool available to them to gain and keep power. For years, Republicans have stood idly by while the left has weaponized government against us." And then Mark Messmer from the 8th also posted on X. Man, they like Jesse. These guys can't stay off Twitter. Messmer posts, "I am proud to support Hoosier State legislators and our great Governor Braun in fighting the long history of weaponized voter manipulation in California, New York, and Illinois. Redistricting in Indiana will accurately reflect the will of Hoosier voices." Now, I think I debunked that very last sentence, but Jesse, what about the weaponization of government, the manipulation from California, New York, and Illinois? What do they make a point at all?
I think there's a tiny point. I mean, I think it's absolutely true that Democrats have worked to gerrymander. So, for example, in Indianapolis, I'm sitting in a seat right now. Like, there were people pushing for an independent, nonpartisan redistricting in Indianapolis, and it's Democrats who said, "No way, we want to make sure to protect our favorite people's seats." Granted, I took one of those favorite people's seats, so it didn't work as well as they hoped it would, but that was wrong. We should have done an independent redistricting, and there are times when Democrats should be called out. But it's funny because I think Trump is playing a very dangerous game here, because I think he forgets that what got him actual popularity among regular working class people was things like drain the swamp, not I will become the biggest swamp monster and play by their rules. People don't want you to like roll down in the dirt. If you're saying the Democrats are scum because they do X and Y, which is why I'm going to do X and Y, you're saying you want to become scum, and you're just mad that people did better at you or did better at the game than you did. So I just think that it's not actually popular among regular working class Republicans or people who voted Republican recently. I think it's going to come back and bite them and make them look like the nakedly political protect the bureaucrats scheme that it is.
I like the way that they bring up California, New York, and Illinois. Now, one, California has an independent redistricting commission. We'll come back to this on the national section because this gerrymandering thing also continues to dominate the national news this week. But, New York, is gerrymandered. Illinois is comically gerrymandered. Maryland's gerrymandered. Okay, those are the only 4 Democratic states that actually do this. There are at least 11 Republican states, including Indiana, including Texas, where they're, going even further, that are far more gerrymandered than the Democratic states. Again, we can come back to this. I do want to note, though, here in Indiana that Governor Braun reiterated that he remains non-committal, and some of the state reps are also not super excited about this idea. Representative Ed Clare from New Albany said, Special sessions should be reserved for emergencies. The president's desperation to maintain a U.S. House majority by stacking the deck in favor of Republicans does not constitute an emergency. Ryleigh, that's pretty strong language from an Indiana Republican directed at the president, eh? Ooh, you are on mute, ma'am.
Sorry, thank you. I would be more inclined to believe Republican politicians towards Trump if they actually held their ground, because we've seen over and over again that they will say one thing of, oh, I'm going to stand against this. This isn't what my people want. And then at the last minute, they'll flip their vote against what their district is saying and telling them to do. So, they can be all talk, but until I actually see action of them taking a stand against him, it's just talk.
Yeah, for sure. We will talk about about gerrymandering a little more in the next segment, the national section. But for right now, I wanted to look at another thing going on in Indiana here, and this from the Capitol Chronicle. So, troubled venture capital company Elevate Ventures has been deemed in breach of lending language in all of its active loan agreements with the Indiana Economic Development Corporation after defaulting on an angel investment program this month. The firm operates the Indiana Angel Network Fund, intended to entice and aid angel investments to Hoosier startups. It nabbed the contract in 2011 under the Mitch Daniels administration, with repayment due exactly 14 years later. Hey, that's now. Quick background: an angel investor is a wealthy private investor focused on financing small business ventures in exchange for equity. Unlike a venture capital firm that uses an investment funds, angels use their own net worth. I needed to clarify that for myself when I was reading the article. So the IEDC sent a request for repayment of nearly $17.2 million. And Elevate Ventures repaid a little less than $13 million on August 4th, falling more than $4 million short. This comes about 3 months after the company was dubbed an entity of interest alongside the IEDC and its nonprofit arm in a forensic investigation of potential financial wrongdoing commissioned by Governor Mike Braun. So, Jesse, I come back to this story a lot because I think we've seen, for as long as the IEDC has existed, it has been a basically slush fund for corruption between Republicans in government and their political donors. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, I understand the stated rationale behind things like this, and it's because currently economic development is a race to the bottom across all 50 states. You can see typical case in point was the Amazon HQ2 search from a few years ago, right? They're like, we could bring all this money, all these jobs, all this recurring tax revenue to you. Who's going to make us the best offer? And then you have cities and states falling over each other to give the very best deal to big corporations. But the reason that this has become so corrupt, like I've got I could talk to you for an hour about why I think that's problematic and why we need socialism, but that's not the prompt here. So, what we could do to make economic development work better in the short term is transparency, democracy, and accountability, right? I've had friends who worked for the IEDC who talked about like the 600-page proposals that they were reading through about different firms trying to relocate here, that everyone involved had to sign a non-disclosure agreement and no one could talk openly about. NDAs don't benefit us, right? When everything happens in the dark, that's when this corruption's allowed to breed. Sunlight's the best disinfectant. Democracy dies in darkness. There's no end of pithy phrases about why you can't let a few people work it out in the back room and come back out into the public with all the details, because money always changes hands in that back room, or promises for future money. It's inherently corrupting to operate in this way. And so I'll give the very qualified good on Braun for shutting this crap down. But it'll come back again in the exact same way with his stooges that he puts in there, unless we structurally change this and make it more of a democratic and accountable organization.
Leslie, I feel bad I skipped you on that one. What are your thoughts on the IEDC here? And Jesse makes some points about increasing transparency. How would you structure these things?
Well, I think that's a little bit above my pay grade, but I do think that the NDAs and not being able to discuss things in many ways are a problem. I also think that companies working to, basically get a bribe to relocate to a state by demanding a tax abatement for 10 or 20 years, and then it turns out that they don't actually provide that many jobs. It doesn't benefit the state as much as we would like to think. It sounds really good to get a new company. When I was campaigning, a lot of people would just say that Indianapolis was so corrupt, all the politicians are corrupt, and it's all about money. And without transparency, these kinds of rumors persist, or these practices. Yeah, I do think we need to be transparent, and we need to rein in this corruption that is engulfing our entire country, basically.
Yeah. So I want to move on to our next story here in Indiana. And as we talked about up in the headlines, you can't go a week without a Todd Rokita story. You can't go a week without a Micah Beckwith story. And he's been on a tour of the state doing a bunch of town halls. And this week down in Newburgh, which is outside of Evansville, there was a bit of a scuffle. So this from the Evansville Courier-Journal. So 2 people were arrested. One of them, a woman tackled by a Warwick County Sheriff's Office deputy during a town hall event hosted by Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith in Newburgh on Wednesday night. Throughout the town hall, the woman, later identified as Amanda Bennett, shouted at Beckwith, as did many other attendees, and authorities told her to stop or she would be removed. After a few warnings and before police moved to remove her, Bennett said she would leave on her own. So a person waiting at the mic for their turn to ask a question was set to restart when a commotion erupted from near the exit. A deputy had tackled Bennett to the ground, and attendees were making their way over to gather around. So Bennett, who is seen in pictures with a sheriff's deputy lying on top of her with her, face pushed to the ground, Bennett was charged with felony battery. In addition to the battery charge, she also faces 1 misdemeanor count of resisting law enforcement and 2 misdemeanor counts of disorderly conduct. Also arrested was Matthew Ike, charged with resisting law enforcement and 2 counts of disorderly conduct, all misdemeanors. They were released on bail Thursday. So now, here's where this gets even more political. So according to Warwick County Sheriff's Office Sergeant Thomas Roll's sworn account, the surveillance footage also showed Democratic candidate for House District 64, Kelly Moore, striking Deputy Dan Bullock. That's the deputy who would pin down Bennett. So Roll wrote that he was requesting Moore also be charged with battery on law enforcement, though as of Thursday afternoon, she did not have a criminal case. Moore was not arrested at the scene. She hadn't been taken into custody or charged. On Wednesday, the Courier and Press, and excuse me, I mislabeled them as the Courier-Journal. That's a different newspaper in the state. They later witnessed a different Warwick County Sheriff's deputy apologizing to Moore outside for raising his voice at her. Ryleigh, there's a lot there. Do you want to weigh in?
I would love to. So the 2 people that were arrested were identified as having been a part of Evansville Resistance, which is like a subgroup of 5051. So I know maybe a little bit more about what's going on. I won't speak to the specifics, but if you watch the video, Amanda is leaving and she, is about to turn the corner for the chairs to get towards the door, and the police officer leans forward and starts towards her, and she's already, upset. She's already frustrated. And then this officer starts to lean towards her, and he is right up on her. And she turns around and says, "Get back, step off me." And then the officer raises his hands. She raises her hands and tries to put space between her and the officer. And then he just takes her to the ground. And then so that happened. And then he puts her in handcuffs and starts leading her, or puts her away. Right before he gets her down on the ground, places her in handcuffs. Or she's on the ground. He's about to put handcuffs on her. Then there's the gentleman, and he is already on the exterior of the door, and there is an older gentleman standing there and starts body blocking the gentleman who was arrested, trying to come back around into the room. And the other gentleman yells and raises his voice at the older gentleman and says, like, don't block me, don't push me. And then by this point, Amanda's already out in the foyer. Another officer comes and grabs, I think his name was Ike, and, gets him away and shoves him up against the wall and puts him in handcuffs. And, you hear the Warwick County Sheriff's Office defending. It's like, oh, this is within our policies. And it's like, you guys started it. If you had left her alone and just let her get out of the room and then had the police made sure that she left, none of this would have happened. But because that officer, you can see it in his eyes, it's really scary, comes up on her and starts the whole thing, and it just falls out from there. Complete overuse, it's got excessive force. He could have just taken her by the arm and pulled her out, but no, he decided he wanted to body slam her to the ground.
You make a good observation there, and I've also flagged that story where so the sheriff review finds no wrongdoing by the deputies at the town hall. Warwick County Sheriff Mike Wilder said use of force review by his office determined deputies' actions were consistent with the agency's policies. Now, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think if your policies dictate you arrest and pin people to the ground for, I don't know, looking at you funny, maybe your policies are the problem. Jesse, you that look says you have some thoughts.
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly. I understand that there are times when law enforcement officers are stuck out, in the wild, right? And there's dangerous things happening and they have to have some discretion to be able to do their jobs. That makes some sense to me, even as a, sometimes critic of some of the methods used by law enforcement. But in a public meeting with surveillance cameras everywhere, there is no risk that this unarmed woman is going to, sabotage or ambush this officer. And so he needs to go into self-defense mode, right? We need our law enforcement to be trained in de-escalation and to help maintain the peace. And I would have the crazy theory that knocking a woman down and handcuffing her in front of a, public meeting is not actually maintaining the peace. It's maintaining terror, which is exactly what dictatorships do around the world. I'm not saying that the Warwick County Sheriff's Office is a, terrorist dictatorship, but I'm saying that this is how we slide in that direction as a county, as a city, as a country, right, at every level. So just think it's, it might be true that generally speaking, your orders allow you to react in the way you do up to and including, but I guarantee you it doesn't say you have to do that. And so, even if they're not going to press charges against the officer or formally discipline him, they should at least be issuing a statement saying the reason we have these orders and these general rules that officers are allowed to abide by is because we think officers deserve protection. That is true. In this case, we do not feel that our officer was under severe threat, and so we don't think this is appropriate. But of course, we're not going to see that, right?
There's a lot there, and I think you hit on the theme of today's show, which is, this stuff is all sort of downstream from the larger cultural milieu in which, authoritarianism and authoritarian tactics are becoming more and more acceptable.
Yeah.
Leslie, Micah Beckwith said the next day that he's going to continue to go on his tour of the state, do all these town halls. I think he really likes the attention that comes with these. They always draw a crowd of folks who are angry because, let's be honest, Micah Beckwith sucks out loud. But should we, what should people do? Should we keep going to these things? Should folks deprive him of the attention he seeks? Or are these a good opportunity to point out his bastardry? I don't know. What's the best way to handle these things going forward?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe a protest outside and nobody going inside, because narcissists crave attention. That's what they're all doing it for. They want attention, attention, attention. Any attention is good attention. He's a smarmy, smug, personality who should not be handed the levers of power. He's not a, somebody who's got true leadership and governing characteristics. And yeah, I don't know, maybe we have made our point. We know how we stand, and they say deny narcissists attention. That's what they're seeking. Just don't give it to them. They feed on that. I mean, it feeds their dopamine receptors, and he's not going to modify. But if nobody came and it was empty and people started mocking him and laughing at him, that would do it. Narcissists don't like to be laughed at. They don't like to be made fun of. It's a psychological makeup that seriously deserves more attention. And we really are, as many mental health professionals say, we're in a mental health crisis. It's something I talked about when I was campaigning. And we are where we are because people with dark triad personalities have been manipulating the system and rising to power. And, the good people have struggled because in a true democracy, those people wouldn't have power. They would be getting help, and the people would recognize that they're not capable and they're not the kind of people who are going to give the people what the people want. What we really want is universal health care, and we want, paid time leave, and we want debt relief, and we want affordable housing, and we want the prices of commodities to come down, none of which are going on right now. So, yeah.
I tend to agree with your thoughts there. And boy, I got to tell you, as much as Beckwith begs for a punch in the face, please don't. I encourage people not to punch Micah Beckwith in the face. Last thing I wanted to cover here in our Indiana section this week from Wish 8, plans for a $1 billion Google data center advance despite local opposition. So a proposal for this data center passed the Metropolitan Development Commission on Wednesday afternoon. It now goes to a full council vote, but many residents who live near this site in Franklin Township are upset, and many of them booed the committee after the proposal passed 8-1. This is a project on 486 acres of farmland in southeastern Marion County near Post Road and Troy Avenue. Under the proposal, the data center is expected to create 50 jobs and will have 10 to 50 years of tax abatement, and it will also take about 10 years for its development. Franklin Township has about 65,000 residents, which is more than most cities in Indiana, and is represented by Republican Michael Paul Hart, who said he cannot support this proposal as currently structured, saying, quote, "We should not be locking up one of the largest remaining land opportunities in Franklin Township for a project that offers limited jobs, reduced tax benefits, and long-term restrictions on infrastructure growth. We must do better," end quote. Now, say the full council that thing is going to move to, hey, Jesse, you're on said full council. Can you comment on this story, or should you not?
Oh, I absolutely, you know me, I'm always down to comment, even when I should keep my mouth shut. In this case, I think it's important that I do raise my voice, though. First off, get out your calendars, get out your red marker, circle today's date, because today is one of the rare occasions you will hear Jesse Brown praise a Republican. My colleague Michael Paul Hart is absolutely doing the right thing here. We love to see it. I want to give praise and credit where it's due. He has been standing with his constituents, and anyone listening to average people, not just in Franklin Township, but all over Indianapolis, I want to say it's at least 90% of regular people oppose data centers going up. The context here, which people outside of Indianapolis might not see, AES, which used to be IPL, it's our privatized monopoly utility company, already has some of the highest rates in the country. They just proposed a rate increase a year ago. Now they're proposing another over 10% rate increase, where if they get what they are asking for in front of the Regulatory Commission, they will have the highest rate of profit of any electric utility in the country. So that's the existing status quo. And now we're trying to add a massive increase in our usage of power and water, actually, in Indianapolis. Everyone sees the writing on the wall. This is going to jack people's electricity rates up even higher. For what, right? You said 50 jobs. That's at the end of the 10-year proposal. Year one, they're promising not promising, they're anticipating 3 jobs after the first year. So this is just like a laughably tiny amount of promise. And we talked earlier in the show about a lot of times these companies don't even fulfill their promises anyway. So when they're not even promising anything worth a damn, why would we, put so much taxpayer money, so much resources at these folks' disposal? I think as of this morning, we have 13 committed no votes. When it goes in front of the full city council, we need a 60% vote in order to override the Metropolitan Development Commission. So ironically, I called them out. I made fun of the Republicans for not standing with their fellow Republican as he's doing the right thing. They have now put out a statement, and every Republican counselor on the Indianapolis caucus, every Republican in the caucus on the council is now publicly committing that they will stand with Michael Paul Hart and vote no on the data center.
Good.
I think Ryleigh made a great point earlier, which is we love to hear that commitment and we want them to actually live through with it, which they haven't always done, at the state level anyway. But that's better than what a lot of Democrats have done. There have been 4 other Democrats with me who have publicly issued statements saying we're opposed to this data center as well. But Vop Osili, the president, and Maggie Lewis, who's the Democratic caucus leader, have not said a word about it. And several other of my Democratic peers have not either. We cannot give away the moral high ground on this important issue. It's not just like a culture war issue. This is a deep economic issue where we're in bed with one of the biggest corporations in the world. This is not what our constituents want. I don't care what political label they use. I don't care how they normally vote. This would be the dumbest thing in the world to make it look like Democrats are the party of giving away resources to a big tech business, right? So please, I'm begging my peers, come out. Let's make this 25-0 unanimously opposed to the data center. This is a slam dunk politically. Thank you.
Okay, I guess let me play devil's advocate for a second and say, Ryleigh, we don't want these data centers in our neighborhood, but we want data, right? I mean, where are we going to put these things? Should we figure out other ways to store huge amounts of data? I don't know how to handle this because we are such a data-driven society. We've got tons and tons of data stored in the cloud all over the place. These things are going up in communities all over Indiana and all over the country, taking up, giant amounts of resources, like Jesse said. What can we do to, I don't know, decrease demand for these?
So it's obviously a very, very big issue. For one, China's putting theirs in the ocean. There's no reason for this to be taking up land. We have hundreds of thousands of miles of coastline. Let's go stick them in the ocean. Second of all, whenever you have these data centers put into communities, you're not only increasing the cost of electricity and people's utility bills, but you're also, in many cases, contaminating those communities with all of the off-gassing that comes from the production of energy to run these data centers. I know that a lot of tech companies and data storing companies have made it so that after a certain number of years, if an account is inactive, they'll just delete the account. I think that's a really good way to clear up space and clear up holding on to this data if it's not needed. I don't understand why this is even a partisan issue at all. You're putting your people's health at risk. Well, you're putting companies' profits above people's health, people's livelihoods, people's ability to keep the lights on, because in other states, I think in New Jersey, people have seen like a $300 spike a month in their electricity bills. So I don't understand why people are begging for that to come to Indiana when people are already struggling with poverty as is, in Indiana especially.
Leslie, we talked about this a little bit before we went on. If these big companies are going to put in these data centers, shouldn't they have to be independently sufficient and produce their own power so they're not draining everybody else's, putting a strain on the grid that everybody else is using? Same thing with their water resources that they take up. I don't know how they do that. Should they be treating their own? There's got to be something that we can do.
Yes. I was radicalized as a child by watching the original cartoon from the book The Lorax. And, there's a new thing that's saying, we are losing our fresh water. And I've been saying for years, water wars will be coming. And our grandchildren and great grandchildren will be, will be so devastated because giving away and ruining this most precious resource is unconscionable. And yes, I think that this is an idea that is not fully fledged. Using all this water for data is suicidal. And I find it ridiculous, right? This 400 and however many acres, right? When people were complaining in the last election about these solar farms, where I would say, but after 10 or 15 years, you can take down solar panels if you want to reclaim the farmland. But when you put buildings on farmland, do you think that's going to be easy to take down? No, it's not. Yeah, they should be forced to have their own energy and not, then put the cost on the consumers. I think that there needs to be more education about data. And this is also anticipating further AI, which there's all these conversations going on now that AI isn't this savior that people who are going to make money off of it are trying to sell us. It's a sales pitch, selling us on Chat GPT and selling us on AI because they stand to make money from it, when maybe there should be more brakes put on this before we gobble up all these resources that we're not going to be able to get back.
Yeah, so much of that data that they're putting in these data centers is just like worthless AI slop. God knows if we eliminated that, how much less of this we would need. And Leslie did mention a report that did come out this week in the context of all this that says, the Great Lakes area is potentially under stress in terms of fresh water usage because of data centers and climate change and groundwater consumption and everything else. And that is linked in my show notes, which you all should subscribe to because they make a good newsletter week in review kind of in their own right. But for now, let us move on to this week's national and international stories, where I don't even have a quick headlines section to go through because it is such a packed week of stories. And I want to begin on Monday, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky came to the White House to visit with President Trump. And this time he brought reinforcements after a contentious meeting with Trump and Vance earlier this year. So this from The Hill. Major European leaders, including German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, French President Emmanuel Macron, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, were all in attendance, and so were European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. By and large, they succeeded in their two intertwined aims to make sure there was no repeat of the earlier Oval Office humiliation and defending Kiev's interests more broadly. So, the interim ceasefire, which Europe has proposed and Trump, until his meeting with Putin last week, was also in favor of. Prior to this, meeting in Alaska, Trump wanted Russia and Ukraine to quickly agree to a ceasefire, which would then set stage for a more comprehensive peace talks. After Anchorage, he appeared to have shifted in Putin's direction, suggesting that it would be better to move to a full settlement without any halfway measures. Trump vouched for Putin's desire to make peace, and actually, during the meeting, took time to call Putin himself personally to see if they can arrange a trilateral meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian presidents and Trump. They have not been able to arrange that to this point. Let's see, who do I come back to now? Ryleigh, is it your turn? Thoughts on this meeting compared to the last one?
I don't have a whole lot of things to say about this one in particular, but I believe that Trump thought he was going to, have this art of the deal and this great meeting, and he was gonna get exactly what he wanted. And then after that meeting and Putin really pressing in on him and saying, no, this is how it's going to be done, he and the rest of his staff visibly looked frazzled. So he's really not the great leader that he thinks he is, and he's definitely not the great negotiator that he thinks he is.
Yeah. Oh, Leslie, did you see him showing off his hat collection to Zelensky?
No, thankfully I missed that. But there are a couple of points I'd like to make. I loved Ursula von der Leyen's comment that Ukraine needs to become a steel porcupine, indigestible. And honestly, I suggest that for all of us, we need to become steel porcupines. And also, I recently watched a documentary that was made in 1991 about Trump, and he's just doing the same things he has always done. When he bought Mar-a-Lago, he wanted, Palm Beach to move their airport so that the planes didn't go over Mar-a-Lago. I mean, it's the same thing. He just doubles down, bigger and bigger and bigger. He makes these blustering, claims that are just so audacious that people have tended to be bowled over. But we need to just stand firm. And that's really the only way. That's the only way. And he clearly has dementia. Clearly has dementia. Clearly.
Jesse, why should Hoosiers care about this issue? Why should we care about Ukraine?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I might have some differences of opinions with some folks on this call, but I think that when we see a dictatorship like Russia invading another country, we want to see resistance to that. But I think what we need to resist is the dictatorship, which naturally leads to militarism and leads to war. And, is it justifiable to declare martial law and suspend elections in the face of an invasion of your country? I think that's somewhat reasonable. I think most people think that's okay. But a Gallup poll came out earlier in August that says 70% of Ukrainians want a negotiated end to this war, not to keep fighting. And so, Trump is trying to make a bunch of political hay off of his, I'm the peace president. I'm trying to end wars. I'm not the one who wants to do, all this meddling around. I want to try to leave NATO. I want all this stuff. And yet he's still trying to organize a tripartite, trilateral agreement. What does the United States have to do with that war, right? If it's not, in fact, somewhat of a proxy war against Russia. And now, of course, Trump wants to be on Russia's side in that war. And so now he's wanting it to be a proxy war against Ukraine. But either way, this is the United States meddling and adding fuel to the fire and increasing war, devastation, and death. Ukraine deserves to have all of their own territory. Russia does not deserve to be rewarded for, invading another country. But at the same time, we need, international agreements, something like the UN, but more democratic and better, where we could peacefully resolve these things. I think it was a good thing that a bunch of European leaders got involved so that we could make this a more diffuse group of people. But it does trouble me when a bunch of European leaders are like, hey, we know someday we might have to fight Russia, so let's just keep throwing Ukrainian bodies into the meat gristle, right? The mill. I don't know what weird combination of phrases I just used there, but I think you get my point. I used to work with a bunch of colleagues who were based in Ukraine, and they were patriotic. They hated Russia. They wanted to fight. But at a certain point, all of your uncles have been killed. Your grandpa's been killed. Now your younger, people are getting drafted, and you don't have elections anymore, and you haven't for 3 years in your country. Most of my friends, and this was over a year ago, were trying to figure out how to escape and illegally leave Ukraine, not how they could enlist and fight. I just think that war, until we're talking class war, every war is actually to the detriment of working people, and we should be seeking peace. That doesn't mean capitulation to dictatorship, but we're increasingly seeing dictatorship on both sides of that war. And so I think that a negotiated peace, not with Trump in charge of it, but a negotiated peace that also works towards disarmament and dismantling the undemocratic institutions that are propping people like Putin up, that's what we actually need.
Trump had a little, little go with Zelensky about not having elections, and he's like, yeah, you like that, don't you? And sort of seemed like, hey, I kind of like this too. That maybe seems like a good idea, and this is what I worry about. He's like, oh, you're at war, you don't have elections. Maybe we should be at war and not have elections. Very worried about that. So I did want to move on to our next story, but Jesse makes a good point about American interventionism and being involved across the world. And I think what galls a lot of Americans is just the inconsistency in this thing. Whereas, we look at Ukraine and we see a smaller country that got invaded by their larger, more powerful rival. And, there's another story where we're on the side of the larger, more powerful rival, and that is in the Middle East, where I want to look at this week in Israel-Palestine, because we cannot look away. So this one first from NPR. For the first time, the UN-backed panel is officially calling what is happening in northern Gaza famine. This is a very precise definition from people who study, famine and rampant hunger, and now they are saying this is a famine and it is entirely man-made and can be halted and reversed. It is currently in the famine classification is in effect in Gaza City and is projected to expand to other areas like Khan Yunis by the end of September. The people in Gaza now dying of starvation are never more than a few miles from warehouses filled with food aid that they have no way to reach. Leslie, thoughts on the starvation, the intentional starvation taking place in Gaza?
I have to take the side of Miss Rachel, right? I heard her on NPR, and she really is just the epitome of goodness. And anybody who's a mother, if you are watching your child starve to death, it would just be the worst tragedy when there's just food a short distance away and people are being murdered who are trying to distribute the food and report on the restrictions on accessing the food. It really is one world or no world. And the vast majority of the people in Gaza have nothing to do with Hamas or this conflict, and yet they are suffering. We know that this is a corrupt war, that Netanyahu wants to stay in power, and this is his avenue. And the human rights abuses are horrific. It is a very complicated situation because this hatred in this region has been going on for, centuries, possibly, definitely decades. And there has been there's been no solution so far, but eliminating the Palestinians is not the way to lasting peace, certainly. And it is just a tragedy that we are watching this unfold.
Yeah, we're watching, and our tax money is, helping pay for it. Ryleigh, it sounds like Leslie was saying, Israel's proposed solution is to eliminate the Palestinians. They've called up 60,000 more reservists as they intend to occupy Gaza City. So another one from NPR here. So the 60,000 reservists are due to begin reporting for duty in September, and that will bring the total to 120,000 mobilized reservists. The plan is to encircle Gaza City, send soldiers in, and then later on send soldiers into central Gaza. Also this week, from the BBC, Israel is telling medics and aid groups to prepare for this Gaza City evacuation, planning to move 1 million residents out of Gaza City. That sounds definitionally like ethnic cleansing, no?
I 100% agree with you, and I think that is what they are aiming to do. Whenever people talk about Israel and Palestine, I don't know how many people have made the correlation, but I just go back to our history with our own indigenous peoples.
Yes.
As an indigenous person, it's completely a parallel. We existed on a land, and then people came and decided that they wanted the land, and they like to paint this nice, pretty picture that we had a mutually beneficial relationship and a nice, happy Thanksgiving. But meanwhile, people were being murdered, they were being assaulted, they were being intentionally starved. The reason that the American buffalo or bison doesn't really exist across the United States anymore is because it was intentionally wiped out to create a induced famine and starvation and destroy people's entire way of life. So, and then, we had the Great Migration or the Trail of Tears, and really, we're going to give you an option, but we're not really going to give you an option. And a lot of people are going to die along the way. I see no other reason for them to do what they're doing than to just repeat history that we've created within our own country.
And I think it's a lot of the blind spot I think a lot of Americans have for this is precisely because our own history was whitewashed and we don't look at the what we did. The foundation of this country's wealth is built on land theft, basically. And speaking of land theft, it's not just Gaza. On the other side of Israel, final approval was given on Wednesday for a controversial settlement in the occupied West Bank that would effectively cut the territory in two. This is settlement development E1 on an open tract of land east of Jerusalem that has been under consideration for more than 2 decades, but frozen due to U.S. pressure during previous administrations, including Republican administrations. The international community overwhelmingly considers Israeli settlement construction in the West Bank to be illegal and an obstacle to peace. Jesse, they're going for it. They're doing the whole thing. Israel, with the Trump administration's approval, appears to be attempting to conquer all of Palestine.
Right. Yeah, which I think, I'm going to say something that I'd ask people to think about for a few minutes. How can we condemn Hamas when we look at what the Palestinian Liberation Organization did, which was unilaterally disarm, even though Israel didn't disarm, so that they could keep their land in the West Bank? And what has happened? We've seen tens of thousands of olive trees bulldozed. We've seen open and illegal annexation. We've seen settlers just running lynch mobs, just killing Palestinians for daring to stand up on their land that they negotiated for. And because they don't have any guns and because they're not shooting back, the settlers are getting away with it, and the Israeli Defense Forces are protecting the settlers. So how can we truly condemn Hamas for armed resistance when we've seen what happens when you do unarmed resistance? Just something to think about. I also wanted to point out, I'm on record as wanting every U.S. military base overseas closed down, just transition for all of the military personnel, find them something productive to do. We should not have an overseas military, period, the end. And the reason for that is because if we actually need a military to help protect against human rights abuses, we would be bombing Israel right now. There is no country on earth that is doing so much intentional ethnic cleansing, induced famine, like putting, it's like, oh, well, they have trans rights. Yeah, and some of their trans resistors are now being put into prison for refusing to go participate in this genocide. They are absolutely out of control, anti-democratic, a corrupt government, open fascists in their government, loudly laughing and talking about wanting to eliminate all of Gazans. And the United States is standing behind this and, in fact, allowing it to continue. Our military is not being used for peace. Our military is not being used to help protect people across the world. I think the best thing we could do, disarm, take care of ourselves, offer support and aid to countries who are fighting against oppression. But while we are the global oppressors, we should just quit with the BS and stop pretending like it's anything other than it obviously is.
That is a apartheid authoritarian state, and I think the Trump administration looks at it as an example. So let's talk about this guy who a lot of folks say was perhaps intelligence for said authoritarian apartheid government, Mr. Jeffrey Epstein here. In this saga this week, on Wednesday, a federal judge denied the Trump administration's request to unseal grand jury materials related to Epstein. Last week, they denied a different request for grand jury documents in Ghislaine Maxwell's case. This week, U.S. District Judge Richard Berman sharply criticized the Trump administration for seeking to unseal these records when the DOJ already has hundreds of thousands of pages of files related to Epstein in its possession. So, the DOJ, in their beneficence, released interview transcripts from Ghislaine Maxwell last month, who talked to Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche Trump's former personal attorney. And if you recall, he gave her limited immunity for 2 days of testimony. That is the transcripts that were released this week, audio and video versions, in which, surprise, surprise, Ghislaine Maxwell, the partner in crime to Epstein, co-conspirator, and an abuser in her own right, said she never witnessed any inappropriate conduct from any man, including President Trump. She denied the existence of an incriminating client list of individuals that benefited from Epstein's crimes and maintain her innocence. Leslie, apparently, she also claimed that Trump helps little old ladies cross the street and buys Girl Scout cookies and is generally an upstanding all-around human being.
Well, I find it just completely insulting because it is elevating what she has to say over the real victims. I did actually recently speak to a man who tried to say that the girls who went to Epstein's island knew what they were getting themselves into, which that is a talking point, right? I was just so deeply viscerally offended. And these girls were lied to, they were groomed, they were misled, and then they were raped and taken advantage of. Ghislaine Maxwell is highly motivated to lie because she wants to get out of prison. She's already used her lies to get herself into a cushy, minimum security, they call it Club Fed. And
yeah, she's a known perjurer, right? So we can't really exactly take her testimony seriously, right?
Yeah, but every woman should be deeply, deeply offended. We are trying to be basically erased from leadership, from believability, from anywhere, from all spheres of life. And this isn't going the way. I mean, how is this going to benefit humanity? How is this really going to, keep us going? I don't know. Release the files. It's a distraction. Release the Epstein files. We all know Trump's been named in them because the DOJ was tasked with finding his name in the Epstein files, and they worked day and night to, highlight every instance where his name was. And everybody should be offended because if you look at the documentary about Jeffrey Epstein, they were looking for girls from poor backgrounds, troubled girls, maybe your parents weren't very involved. That's a huge swath of the Republican voting base, have been lower income white people. And they are deeply right to want the release of these files. And I don't know. We can't stop talking about it because it is an absolute tragedy, and the victims need to be heard and honored, not Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah, so, this week we didn't, but the House Oversight Committee did receive a batch of Epstein files. Chairman of that committee, James Comer from Kentucky, confirmed their arrival in a statement on social media saying thousands of pages of Epstein-related documents had been delivered to the committee. Comer said the Justice Department would conduct its own review of what should be redacted in the files. Real trustworthy players there, we're sure. Critics, including some Republicans, say they're worried the release will be far from comprehensive, and Democrats have argued the release to the public will be limited and carefully controlled by Republicans. Ryleigh, do you tend to agree or disagree with that sentiment?
I agree that, given the situation, leadership that we're under, that they're going to protect the people that they deem are worthy of protecting and go after people that they deem are disposable. I don't understand why this is not a bipartisan issue, because, even Leslie, like you said, like someone uses as a talking point, oh, they knew what they were getting into. They were minors. They can't make that decision for themselves. Why are we justifying someone abusing women and abusing minors just because they have money and influence? Your money and influence shouldn't protect you from the law. Coming from the party that, again, like I said, is the party that is of law and order. Why are you pretending like this isn't happening because they have money and influence? if you want law and order all over, do law and order all over, but don't pick and choose who it's going to apply to.
Yeah, and I think we have to keep saying it again and again and again throughout this Epstein stuff. Trump was right there the whole time. These guys were best friends for at least 10 years. There's countless photos and videos and documentation of these guys being close associates. Everything else, all of the news that we talk about on a day-to-day basis. We talked about this a little bit before we went on air. Is it a distraction from the Epstein stuff? Or is the Epstein stuff a distraction from everything else? It's all horrible, but I mean, Jesse, I think as long as this story stays in the news, I think folks like us have to keep putting Trump and Epstein together. That's why I use that photo like every week.
100%. Yeah, because at the end of the day, I don't think that the majority of Americans are like evil people, right? I think that they voted for Trump because they had some misunderstandings about a couple of things. And, and we have a media environment that just floods them with lies, et cetera. But, they had economic uncertainty, which was very reasonable. And they really did have that. And they saw political gamesmanship and bureaucracy that wasn't in their best interest, which, again, was also true. However, Trump portrayed himself as the drain the swamp guy when he is, again, king of the swamp. He is Swamp Thing himself. And the more that we could show that to people and say, he's not trying to get pedophiles out of government. He's the biggest pedophile that's ever been in government. And he wants that to continue. And he's fighting hard to make sure it continues. I think that helps break the spell and helps wake these working class people up who, like me, wanted a change and a fight back against the two-party system that was holding everybody back. But they just were willing to accept this, like, oh, well, maybe, I know he's running as a Republican, but the establishment hates him. And so maybe he's going to shake things up. Like, I think that people, I'm a lot more sympathetic in 2016 than in 2024, but I do understand where people are coming from. I obviously don't think they made the right decision, but I think that giving them the information to help them make better decisions in the future is the way forward, rather than just lecture them about how sexist and racist they are, right? Like, okay, you care about kids, you hate pedophiles. Great. Do I have a solution for you? Let's get rid of Trump, right?
For whatever it's worth, this is the thing that seems to be sticking to him, driving a wedge between him and some on his base. And yeah, like you said, it is incumbent on us to drive that wedge further. So they can't do things like election rigging out loud. Now, we talked about the Indiana side of this with the gerrymandering, but this week, the Texas Democrats, who had previously fled their state to deny the Republican state legislature their quorum to keep them from passing horribly gendered maps, well, this week they folded. Texas Democrats returned on Monday, clearing the way for Republicans to quickly pass this legislation, which they did later in the week. Now, before that happened, there was more drama, of course, as Republicans ordered the Democrats who had fled the state to be chaperoned by Texas law enforcement to make sure they would come back to vote on this thing. One of those Democrats, State Representative Nicole Collier, refused to sign this permission slip and was confined to the State House floor for a 3-day sit-in. I found this particularly gross. I don't think it got enough play in the media. They talked about Collier and the way she was stuck there and her bravery staging the sit-in, but I don't think they tied the way that they were basically forcing a black woman to get a white man's permission to leave the plantation. I mean, did anybody else see this thing this way? I see some nods. Yeah. So also, after everybody got back in, the state house passed these gerrymandered maps. The state Senate passed their maps on Saturday after thwarting an attempted filibuster. This thing will go to Governor Greg Abbott's desk, and he will sign them. Thoughts from Leslie on the Texas portion of this gerrymandering?
I just think it's so sad, right? they know that they can't win on the issues. And so they want to stay in power by rigging the election every way they can. They've been doing this for years. And it is just such a tragedy of white male supremacy that they could work for the people, but they just are really working for themselves. And I from what Heather Cox Richardson says, Republicans don't like gerrymandering. We really should have independently drawn maps. That's fair. While I was campaigning, I would say, remember like Deflate Gate or something with the Patriots, when the the NFL team, they kept winning and then they had all this incentive to keep winning. And people don't like that, right? They want it to be basically fair. And so the people are going to have to, rise up more and say enough is enough. And, but I don't know, we're going to be really stuck because all the election rigging is getting worse and worse. And, I don't know, but it is a tragedy. I mean, Texas itself is a real tragedy, and they don't care what the people want. They don't care what the people think.
Well, we mentioned those 11 states where, Republicans have used extreme gerrymandering to cement themselves in power, like Indiana, and Texas is one, and they're, gerrymandering themselves even further now at Trump's discretion. Now, you said, folks, they want fair maps, and I generally think everybody does. Some states, their voters actually demanded that their states use fair maps, and one of those was California, which has used an independent redistricting commission to draw their last couple sets. But this week, Governor Gavin Newsom is asking California voters to temporarily waive the independent redistricting commission so California Democrats can gerrymander their own state maps to counter what Texas is doing. Ryleigh, I want to ask you about California and Newsom. So, first of all, if you're a California voter, are you going to approve this?
Well, I think Newsom made a great point of they voted as a state whether to call this a special redistricting session. So he asked his people, is this what you want to do? It wasn't just a decision unilaterally made by the leadership. So I think, he said they called a special session to explicitly get more seats. There was no question about why they were doing it. And, if you want to play by what we talked about earlier with Indiana and saying, it needs to represent who we are as a nation. Okay, well, if Texas is going to gerrymander the maps, let's go play ball. I think that there's a dangerous conversation happening around like people criticizing Newsom because of some of the stances he's taken on things in the past, but we don't have time for purity politics anymore. Not that we ever did, but we especially don't now. He's taking a stand. He's mocking Trump. He's getting under he's playing the way that they've been playing. We can't play nice anymore. They've been playing dirty for so long, and that's how we got in this situation. So if you want to, if they want to get dirty, let's go play in the mud. Let's do some mud wrestling. Like I'm all for it personally.
Yeah, and aside from the gerrymandering stuff and Newsom using his power in California to counter that, he's also been engaging in a lot of social media shenanigans, trolling Trump. That's a whole separate conversation. Maybe that's our one big thing next week on how to deal with a bully. But Jesse, it's so California's having to go to the people to undo something they already did. This is a problem that I think Democrats may run into in other states where if they try to counter some of the Republican shenanigans, they may find themselves hamstrung, because in Democratic states, like, we've actually tried to do things like enact fair districts and use like nonpartisan redistricting commissions. Is there any way out of this becoming a race to the bottom?
Yeah, so I think that you're pointing out a really important thing, which is that the whole system has always been rigged in the favor of rural districts, right? Like, we still have an electoral college. We have a bicameral legislature with the Senate Like these things don't exist. Like the concept that individual regions would be able to draw their own maps without having to consult the voters, that doesn't exist in any other developed country on earth. This is just a huge, hundreds of years old anachronism. And I think that, I think it makes sense for California to be doing what it's doing. I don't think we could just, again, take the moral high ground and ignore like realpolitik. And I think we need to fight back and resist fascism as much as possible. And I'm glad that we're taking it to the voters to ask for their permission to do that. And I think that we need something a lot more drastic and a lot bolder of a vision if we want to fight back against Trump. Because you look at Project 2025, and then there is a document, Project 2029, which is supposed to be the Democratic fight back. And it's like gets us back to taking away some of Project 2025, but still has ratcheted us to the right a little bit. I just double checked myself, and they do have abolished the Electoral College. Yeah, should be a no-brainer, but it doesn't have like DC statehood on there. It doesn't have, just a number of like pretty moderate common sense reforms that only don't exist because of politicians. Like you can ask 9 out of 10 Americans, like, well, of course, why would anyone not have the right to have a senator just because of arbitrary lines on the map? And so I think we're still weaving, in this case, Democrats are still playing small ball while like there's open fascism going on. And we're like, well, technically the parliamentarian says that we can only do X or Y. That's ridiculous. Yeah. We just need to be proposing like much more radical changes. And then maybe we negotiate down. I'm not saying we stop doing parliamentary politics, but, we have to fight fire with fire, not by getting into the dirt necessarily and playing the exact same tit for tat redistrict, map, but more of just no, we need to take bureaucrats' power to control our lives away by making an independent redistricting mandate at every level of government. No government should be able to take away your right to vote. That is also 2029, but they don't spell it out in the way that they should, which is the government should not be able to say you're an illegal, therefore now you can't vote. The government should not be able to say you're in jail, therefore now you cannot vote. Like, why should the government be able to restrict your right to vote for any reason? If there are that many criminals or illegals or dangerous people that they are a substantial voting bloc, then why would they not get some representation? So I think we need to be a lot more straightforward and bombastic in what we push for. And then again, maybe we negotiate down from there. But glad that they're fighting back, want them to fight back even more.
If the Trump era has shown us nothing, it's that you can go big. You can do the thing. I don't like the thing that these guys are doing, but they're going for it. And it should tell Democrats that we can go for it and make the reforms that we really need in this country. I do want to move on to our another portion of this story, though, because beyond the gerrymandering, Trump this week also said he wants to stop states from using vote by mail and that he wants to ban certain voting machines. So he announced this on Monday on his True Social site that he plans to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots and voting machines ahead of next year's midterms. Part of his plan includes signing an executive order that bars states from using mail ballots and potentially some voting machines. Democrats have been more likely to use mail-in ballots compared to Republicans since 2020, and that gap has only gotten wider. Now, R Street Institute director Matt Gerner, and this is a Republican think tank, said it would be a huge undertaking and is highly, I think it's highly unlikely that he could end vote by mail or the use of very particular voting machines in time for 2026 now. So listen, I'm going to be the first one here, Leslie, to say that he actually has a point about certain types of voting machines, because there are some jurisdictions, particularly places like Georgia, where they have touchscreen voting machines that have no paper trail. So
there is definitely a problem with there's a problem with the voting machines, and we don't know if there was hacking for definite, sure, in 2024, but even in my county, Porter County, the vote counting machine didn't seem to be working initially. And, there's definitely malfeasance, and people who are motivated to screw with the election are motivated to screw with the election. But Trump just is a chaos agent. He's abusive. It's like he's trying to hit us all so that we cry and scream. We know a lot of this is distraction from, the Epstein files and everything else that's going on. And he just wants to, throw all the papers in the air so that, like an octopus, he's spewing out the ink so he can go that way and get away. We definitely have a problem with voting and the counting of the votes in this country. I don't know the correct way to fix it all, but yeah, he's just definitely trying to do this just to mess with people's heads. I mean, that's what he's good at. That's what he's been doing his whole life. He's incredibly manipulative. And as long as people are manipulated by what he does, he's going to continue to do it. That's the tragedy.
Yeah, I do think, like we use here in Indiana, we need hand-marked paper ballots everywhere. You can still use machines to count them, which you have to, but we shouldn't be using machines to actually mark our votes for us. It is very problematic. Now, Ryleigh, so regarding the voting by mail, there are some states, like I want to say Oregon, Washington, and maybe Colorado, that do all of their voting by mail quite successfully with no fraud and better participation than Republican states, I may add. I don't know about you, but I'd like to see mail-in voting everywhere. What do you think?
I think it's a good avenue to pursue. My question more is, he says that he wants to get rid of certain types of voting machines and he wants to get rid of mail-in voting. And given what we've seen coming out of Rockland County, that they have shown that there has likely been manipulation in the tabulation of the machines because of the p-value being small. There's a whole report about it. But if he's wants to get rid of the voting machines that do have that paper trail and getting rid of mail-in voting, that raises the question, are you only wanting to retain the voting machines that don't have the paper trail and cannot be proven that they've been manipulated? That's my bigger concern of why. Why do you want to do that? Not because you're concerned about false voting, but I think there's something deeper there.
Yeah, and there was tampering. There were cases. We saw it in Georgia. We saw it in Michigan with folks trying to get into the back end of these voting machines. Just this week, Trump threatened harsh measures against Colorado if they didn't free Tina Peters from prison, and she is a former Mesa County clerk who was sentenced to 8.5 years in jail after tampering with county voting machines after the 2020 elections. So this is still in the news. I do want to move on to our next story, though, because this week on Friday, the FBI searched former National Security Advisor John Bolton's home in a probe to find classified records. So CIA Director John Radcliffe provided FBI Director Kash Patel the intelligence that was the basis of the search warrant used by federal investigators to raid Bolton's home and office. A source familiar with the matter told NBC News. This search began about 7 a.m. As part of an investigation into Bolton's handling of classified materials and potential instances of such materials being used in leaks to the media. Bolton served in 2 Republican administrations, first as an ambassador to the UN under George W. Bush, and later as Trump's national security advisor during his first term. The two did not part amicably, with the president in 2019 claiming he had fired Bolton, and Bolton claiming that he had offered his resignation in a disagreement. Since that time, Bolton has emerged as a fierce Trump critic, even writing a 2020 memoir about his time in the administration. During that first Trump administration, the DOJ investigated Bolton at that time over classified information and unsuccessfully pursued legal action to stop publication of that memoir. Bolton now joins a growing list of Trump critics on Kash Patel's hit list that the administration has targeted since the inauguration, including former FBI Director James Comey, former CIA Director John Brennan. We got Miles Taylor and Alexander Vindman in there. All of them investigated in just under 7 months were on Patel's roughly 60 name hit list. Jesse, now I'm no John Bolton fan, but this is not a good look.
Yeah, couldn't have happened to a worse guy. Definitely not for John Bolton. And what John Bolton wants in the government is bad and evil things nationally, internationally. And this is dictatorship. This is dictatorship. And like all dictators around the world, it doesn't matter what political labels the dictators use. The actual only important thing that ever matters is loyalty, right? We look at Xi Jinping, we look at any of the South American leaders on the right or the left, and you'll notice that they look for corruption, and then they look for malfeasance and people who are leaking information. And strangely enough, we only look for the people who aren't loyal to the dictator, right? So when we see Pete Hegseth leaking information to the media in a Signal chat, that's excusable. That's nothing that needs to be gone into, even if it was just embarrassingly inept, right? But when John Bolton, who's a critic, does the same thing, we pursue that, call it an attack against corruption, call it whatever you want. But it's pretty clear what's going on, which is this is dictatorship. This is making sure people understand as long as you stand with Trump, you can say or do whatever you want. But the second you stop agreeing with Trump, it doesn't matter what you say or do, they'll find some reason to take you down. So that's just as simple as it is.
Yeah, Leslie, man, so it's good to see they're concerned about the handling of classified documents now. I seem to recall Trump had boxes and boxes and boxes of them stuffed in his bathroom down at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a tragedy. It's rules for me and not for thee, and it's it is, the whole thing is just ridiculous. Bolton, I read recently, I had forgotten that he had called Trump a moron. So they're just going after the critics, trying to silence dissent. It's incredibly unhealthy. There wouldn't be as much dissent if there weren't as many problems as there are. We're really in a mess right now, America. We're really in a mess, and we need an organized national strike, which I've just read takes a lot of time to organize. I think the protests are wonderful. We can do more with boycotting. But I think sadly, with their 5 stages of grief, is that we're really realizing this is going to take a long time. This is going to be a fight for the rest of our lives unless something happens that we don't foresee. But, I'm just going to go back to Scandinavia. We could be more like Denmark, and we could be more like Finland if we can get our act together and clean house. But it's really going to be a challenge to tackle these dark triad personalities, which are more likely to occur where there's more income inequality and less gender equality. So, the more we can rein in this rampant toxic capitalism and, restore women's rights, the more things will return to a healthy situation. But dismantling regulations and poisoning our air and water, and trying to keep our population ignorant, going after universities, is not the way to sustainability. And we really are going to need to educate more voters, I think, in Indiana, because, one of our great problems has been voter apathy. And we really are going to need to go door to door and start talking to our neighbors and getting them to come out and vote. And that is my, my plea to anybody listening to this in Indiana. All of these things are wonderful, but we really need to have the conversations. And, maybe we don't convince somebody on this day, but just we need to put it out there, and we need to go and keep being a stand for being truly healthy, not just performative healthiness. Not the BS, eliminate vaccines when vaccines have been proven to sustain life. So sorry, I got a little bit off topic there, but yeah.
actual health, not Maha. Very, very like a holistic look at just like our populations. And like I think you said, if we take care of people, right? If you eliminate that equality, if you address people's material conditions, we're not going to have so much to be pissed off about. And there, you don't need demagogues. They don't, they're not appealing if you're well taken care of. Here's something that pissed some people off this week, and I want to get your opinion on it. So Friday, we found out that the U.S. will invest 10% in, we'll take a 10% stake in Intel, the microchip maker. So according to, NPR, Trump said on Friday he had asked Intel CEO Lip Bhutan for a 10% stake in the company and that he agreed. Apparently, the CEO said he walked in wanting to keep his job. This is according to Trump, and he ended up giving us $10 billion for the United States. In a statement released on the company's website late Friday afternoon, Intel confirmed that the government would make an $8.9 billion investment in Intel common stock, reflecting the confidence the administration has in Intel to advance key national priorities and the critically important role the company plays in expanding the domestic semiconductor industry. Intel has stumbled in the race to feed soaring data center demand, which we talked about, for chips used to build AI models known as GPUs, graphics processing units. The leader in that field is Intel's Santa Clara neighbor, NVIDIA, now the world's biggest company with a market capitalization of over $4 trillion. Now, earlier in August, Trump announced that NVIDIA would pay the U.S. 15% of its revenues of the H20 chips sold to China in exchange for being allowed to sell them there. Now, Ryleigh, I have some thoughts on this, but I want to hear yours first.
I think you hit it right on the head. Of this is a conflict of interest, especially with our national pressure to acquire and control the market of the semiconductors. I don't think that business really has any place in politics. The reason that we're in the situation that we're in and bowing down to the will of the companies is because we've allowed them to have that much power and have that much say and bow down to their bottom line over the betterment of the people. So
yeah, well, so this one it kind of seems like things are going the other way. Instead of the businesses putting all their money into politicians, this is the government putting its money into business. And I, for one, actually think this is kind of a good idea. Like, Jesse, I don't know. The critics are like, oh, this is communism. And I'm like, ooh, do the oil industry and the healthcare industry next.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. I am similar in mindset to Bernie Sanders here, who did come out in favor of this, although he pointed out that his proposed amendment to the CHIPS Act that would have done this, had the U.S. directly invest in the chip manufacturers, that would have been in exchange for the huge investment we already made, and it would have required them to onshore jobs, to increase wage protections, and increase environmental protections. This Trump deal got none of that, right? But at least does have the United States earn money on investments that we've already made just without actually owning part of the company in exchange. But then I think we do have to talk about, I'm a socialist, right? So I'm not going to be opposed to the government owning, industries. However, what is the government, right? Like, because we had the remains of a democratic republic that was like inherently like suited to be, as Ryleigh was saying, bought out by capitalists and really hard to have democratic controls. And then what few democratic controls we did have all just been wiped away, right? So if we actually want our government to be anything resembling a democracy or republic or whatever conservatives word we want to use, if we want the people to be the ones ruling and in charge here, we have to have democratic oversight and accountability. We can't just have our executives just on a whim, just suddenly buying 10% of big industries without talking to anybody or any kind of a plebiscite about it. So, quick aside here, I think that we need to be openly saying we are going to arrest ICE agents. If Democrats get back into power, we are going to have war crimes tribunals for what is going on right here, because Trump has cut all the strings of the checks and balances, COVID brain for a second there, sorry. And they don't exist anymore. And if we come back into office and just pretend that they exist and continue playing by the rules the way they used to exist, then the next time somebody like Trump comes into office, which sadly I don't think this is the last time, they'll go right back to wreaking havoc, right? So we absolutely need to actually create a system of checks and balances that meaningfully constrains the government. And I think that has to include penalties for the people who have intentionally disregarded that. So sorry to throw a little curveball in there, but I thought it was important to say.
Well, no, you know what? That curveball kind of takes us right to the last thing I wanted to cover on our international news this week, and that is the Trump regime's increasingly using National Guard troops in states, in D.C., in law enforcement and immigration capacities, which is beyond their scope. So 6 Republican states have now sent National Guard troops to D.C. amid this most recent crackdown on crime, which, you know, we determined at the top of the show is at an all-time low, but that's their excuse. So on August 11th, Trump announced the federal takeover of DC police force, which we know about, saying he was sending 800 federal DC National Guard members into the Capitol to staunch this crime wave, right? And now Republican governors of Mississippi, Louisiana, Tennessee, West Virginia, South Carolina, and Ohio are deploying their National Guards to Washington upon the Trump regime's request. Now, funny story, the states sending these troops to D.C. have way worse crime problems than D.C. does, according to an analysis by the Democracy Docket of the FBI's crime statistics. 53 cities across Louisiana, Mississippi, Ohio, South Carolina, Tennessee, and West Virginia had higher murder rates than D.C. in 2024. Leslie, how do you say irony?
It's a publicity stunt, you know. It's just Trump doing what he's always done. And I recently was thinking, you know, the thing is that when his casino, one of his casinos, I don't know if it was the Taj Mahal, was doing really poorly, his father came in and bought, I don't know, $400,000 worth of chips and then never cashed them back in to give him, you know, a loan. And he, in a way, is looking for a daddy to bail him out, but daddy's not here anymore. And he's got distraction and pomp and BS and, you know, looking tough when, come on, man, that guy couldn't win one punch in a round. He's not a tough guy. He's a classic bully. And it is ridiculous how many other, I guess maybe they're all beta men, just lap it up and just want to be there. You know, they want to be seen as tough and big men. And this isn't true strength, as I think a lot of us know. I think it is, it's sad for the people of DC who they're the ones who've cleaned up their own city. And they have a lot to be rightly proud of. And I think that, you know, Trump is jealous. He's jealous of the Smithsonian and how awesome it is. And, you know, he's just desperately looking for some kind of a win instead of trying to, you know, mitigate food shortages, trying to bring down prices, trying to end childhood poverty, all the things that he should be doing. But we know he just wants to do what's wrong because it's wrong. He wants to do what's wrong because it's wrong. He's said that in, you know, previous interviews. And I don't, you know, it's just, we're going to just have to get tougher at standing up to him. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a tragedy. It's going to go to, you know, Chicago, which is our neighbor. And this is a prelude, you know, some people say, to the 2026 election. Yeah, we need to stand up, America.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you know, a lot of it is just about looking tough, right? And as part of that, these guard troops in DC will be allowed to carry their service weapons according to a directive from the Secretary of Defense. So the interim commanding general of the DC National Guard retains the authority to make any necessary force posture adjustments in coordination with the DC Metro Police and federal law enforcement partners. But yeah, they're going to be allowed to carry weapons, which is new and not great. Ryleigh, you're just a young one. Are you familiar with Kent State?
A little bit, yeah. I know that I don't remember which war. I think it was Vietnam. But there were protests going on at Kent State, and they called in the National Guard, and there was a shooting, and several students, I don't know how many, ended up being killed because of trying to tamper down unrest. That's about again. You clapped it on the. I'm young, so I don't know a whole lot, but I do know that much.
Well, the point is, and I think you were getting at it, is that like these guys, this is not what they're trained for. The National Guard is not meant to be doing, crime control. They're not law enforcement officers. That's not what they're here to do. And yet, Jesse, one last thing. Trump's mobilizing up to 1,700 National Guard troops in 19 states to widen the crime and immigration crackdown, like we just talked about. Not their purview, but documents obtained by Fox News show planning for activations in Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, Ohio, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Virginia, and Wyoming. Texas is projected to host the most significant Guard presence. Jesse, what do all those states have in common?
Gosh, I just can't seem to figure it out. It just doesn't make a ton of sense. Although, Indiana's in here as well. It's ridiculous that we are still operating. You talk about Second Amendment, and what that exists for and why that was put into our Bill of Rights, right? And I just pulled up just to double check. I didn't want to slander anybody, so I pulled up the National Rifle Association website just to look for their news release saying this is what we've been talking about. This is why we exist. This is why private citizens have guns, is because when the federal government comes in and sends troops in to tell you what you can and can't do, we want to be able to stand up for ourselves. For some reason, I think their site must be down or something. I just wasn't able to find that press release anywhere. So really odd, because this is really
what flares. Yeah.
Government overreach and oppression. Like that's exactly what they've been talking about. So anyway, I just wanted to get a dig about that. I also just want to talk about this is, I got to get a crack in on him somewhere, right? This is the flip side and intensified version of Joe Hogsett, for example, our Indianapolis mayor's insistence on running around chasing ribbon cuttings as opposed to actually fixing problems. It's about how do we look in the media, and Trump wants to look like he's tough on crime and he's really cracking down, he's fixing the problems. As we talked about extensively on the show, there is no crime wave, right? Crime is actually decreasing. It's not in acceptable levels, but sending in dudes with guns is not the way that you actually lower crime. But it will get a lot of TV press and then get people to associate him with law and order, as opposed to this manufactured media conception of lawlessness and crime. So, it's again, just like trying to jingle the keys in your face while picking your pocket, right? It's to distract you. It's to make you think that something is really getting taken care of, when maybe the problem doesn't even exist. Maybe the problem exists, but this isn't the way you fix it. And it's a distraction from the Epstein stuff. It's a distraction from the self-enrichment and corruption going on. Not saying we shouldn't care about it. It's obviously horrific, but the goal is to get people arguing about something that was never in question before they started this, right? So,
can I have something to add?
Please.
Whenever Trump first released the initial announcement, his exact phrasing was to make DC beautiful and clean it up. And his initial intention was to clean up the homelessness in DC. And then they started going door to door and knocking on people's doors and setting up police barricades or checkpoints and catch people that way. And if you look at the pictures of the people who were arrested, you will see a very distinct category of people who are being arrested, and it's mostly Black and Brown Americans. So his version of cleaning things up and keeping things beautiful really is just white nationalism at its core, and erasing people, just period. So he's trying to push that everywhere. It's white nationalism.
Ryleigh, I'm glad you brought that up, because that really takes us very nicely to our one big thing today, which is the Trump cultural revolution, right? It's not just troops in the streets. It's not just the National Guard in our nation's capital. It's really a battle for the culture, for our hearts and minds as well. And there have been several instances of this in just the last couple weeks that we can point to as really, this is just a wide-ranging assault on American culture at large. If you look last week, the White House issued loyalty ratings for companies, right? So the West Wing has created this scorecard that rated 553 companies and trade associations on how hard they work to support and promote the one big beautiful bill, according to a White House official. So Axios learned that examples of good partners on the White House list include Uber, DoorDash, United, Delta, AT&T, Cisco, Airlines for America, it's a lobbying group, and another lobbying group, the Steel Manufacturers Association. Factors in the rating include social media posts, press releases, video testimonials, ads, attendance at White House events, and other engagements related to OB3, as the mega bill is known internally. I mean, Leslie, we were just talking about the government buying up parts of companies like Intel. Here is another way they are getting themselves intimately intertwined with business.
Well, you were talking about culture. American culture has been enviable and has been an influence on the whole world for many, many years. As a recording artist, a singer-songwriter, I can attest to that. Movies are one of our greatest exports. So is music. I went to a music festival in Sweden. I was recently in Denmark. That's why I can tell you it's pretty awesome over there. And one of the bands we saw was Queens of the Stone Age, and people were so into it. And I think that a lot of this regime's focus is really, it's just jealousy, and it's maybe just a failure to understand the awesomeness of our culture. Stephen Miller attacking quote unquote aging hippies who need to take a nap. Hey, I'm proud to play anytime for the aging hippies to keep them going. Because they weren't wrong. And the 60s with the culmination of the music and the fashion and the ideas was really inspirational, and it really did have a positive effect on our culture. And we have been missing some of that, and we need to revive that. We really just, like I keep saying, we just need to rise up. So this is an open call. I'm happy to play for you aging hippies, because you are protesting, you are boycotting, you are setting an example. We do need more young people. Ryleigh, thank you. And, but I don't blame the younger people. I think they're busy making ends meet, and or trying to start their own families, and that takes a tremendous amount of energy. And so the hippies and the older people who have retired and who have the time, I celebrate you. Keep going, and we're here for you. And no, I mean, what they're doing is idiotic. Everything Trump touches dies, because he doesn't understand culture. These people don't understand culture. They don't appreciate it. They can't put two and two together. They live in one moment, one tweet, one media cycle. They can't see the big picture. They obviously aren't thinking about the future, because they would be protecting the environment. They would be protecting our greatest resource, which is our humanity. We are the brains that, went to the moon. We are the brains that have come up with all kinds of things, and our culture is richer for all the immigrants. And, I spoke at a Grammy was like a listening tour they did after they got called out for not having enough women and people of color on stage, and I said, like, I mean, let's face it, like, without Black Americans, we would not have American music. If you think of all the contributions they have made to music. And so this stuff it's idiotic. It is, trying to get you to focus on one little thing and ignoring the big picture. So we just need to keep standing firm and getting more people to our side, because the majority of the people are good people. Trump is underwater on like every single issue. And, you can't run away from that. He's underwater. People don't like it.
Yeah, Leslie, I'm glad you talked about the art and music angle of this, because it ties in very nicely with Trump's takeover of the Kennedy Center. So he announced earlier this year that he is going to host this year's Kennedy Center honors. I mean, after all, he used to be on The Apprentice, right? So he unveiled this year's honorees, screened by him personally to veto anyone that was too woke. And so during the announcement, when he said he will host this year's Kennedy Center honors, he reminded everyone that he has his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and announced a characteristically white and male-heavy list for this year's honorees, including Broadway star Michael Crawford, actor Sylvester Stallone, singers George Strait and Gloria Gaynor, and members of the rock band Kiss. In choosing these honorees, Trump said, quote, "I would say I was about 98% involved. They all went through me. I turned down plenty. It went too woke. I had a couple of wokesters. Now we have very great people. Very great. Very different than it used to be. Very different." So, what do you think, Ryleigh, of this year's Kennedy honorees and Trump personally choosing them?
I don't think that Trump has enough taste and knowledge of culture and appreciation of culture to be qualified to make these decisions. So while some of the musicians that he picked, I do like their music, I think it kind of misses the point of the Grammys, and it's the people who have been culturally influential. And some of those are a little past the
Yeah.
making waves in music.
Also, like, I don't know, man, doesn't he have more important things to do than to choose?
In wars, since we're apparently getting into wars and we're supposed to be a no-war president, but
I mean, we just covered that last week full of all of these things. Trump should be attending to war in the Middle East or tariffs, or, well, actually, maybe he should stay out of those things. You know what? On second thought, maybe we should just let Trump handle the Kennedy Center and let somebody else handle the governing. But we should keep him away from the Smithsonian, which the White House is also looking to control. So this one from NBC News: the White House is conducting an expansive review of the Smithsonian's museum exhibitions, materials, and operations ahead of America's 250th anniversary to ensure they align with President Donald Trump's view of history. The assessment, which was first reported by the Wall Street Journal and confirmed to NBC News, will include reviews of online content, internal curatorial processes, exhibition planning, the use of collections and artist grants, and wording related to museum exhibit messaging. So this order taking over the Smithsonian was signed on March 27th and calls for removing improper ideology from the Smithsonian Museum and the National Zoo. You got to keep woke out of the zoo. So NBC News reported in May that historical leaders and critics were questioning why exhibits at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture on the National Mall were rotating out. NBC News found that at least 32 artifacts that were once on display had been removed, including Harriet Tubman's Book of Hymns, Frederick Douglas's narrative. Harriet Tubman Book of Rhymes filled with gospel songs that she is believed to have sung as she led enslaved people to freedom through the Underground Railroad. There we go. And the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, the memoir by one of the most important leaders of the abolition movement. The Smithsonian also recently made headlines after it removed a placard referring to Trump from an impeachment exhibit, sparking concerns over his influence on the cultural institution. Mention of 2 of his impeachments was restored to the exhibit after criticism of the removal. Jesse, we're rewriting history, man.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's 2 things going on here. Number one is the most important thing to Trump, which is that Trump looked good to all people at all times, right? So that's the last thing you mentioned. But the other thing goes back to grievances, right? And so, Trump understands clearly that the only path to political power for him lies in, despite, it is true, like more people of color, more Black people went to him in 2024 than they did in 2016. But that is the, nibbling around the edges, right? The core of his constituency is white dudes, right? It's white men. And white men, there is a cultural memory of a time in the 1960s and 70s when union membership was high, when you were able to provide for your family working at the factory job you got with a high school education and buy your house by the age of 30 years old, right? Like, there was a time in this country in living memory of a lot of people where white men had it better than they do right now. And so he's tapping into this real system of grievances. And you can talk at length about how that was based on the oppression of other people and always has been. But what has changed since then is not predominantly that other people have become oppressed less. It's that billionaires are getting away with more murder. They're taking more money out of everybody's paychecks. The inequality is getting worse. And because white men are seeing that their status is declining, he is playing into this grievance mentality and trying to blame anybody else except for the billionaires like him, right? We know who really is benefiting. It's those uber rich people, but he can't direct energy against that because that's like him and his buddy Jeffrey Epstein, right? He can't have people mad at them because he understands that he is that guy, right? So we have to find some other thing for people to be mad about, again, to keep jangling the keys in your face and distracting you. And so I don't think Trump cares that much about culture. He cares about TV. He cares about entertainment. All that stuff is like what he would be doing 24/7 if he was the president. We've seen that, right? But in terms of like the Smithsonian, who here thinks that he's actually even visited the Smithsonian, interested in the culture there? What he's wanting to do is continue to have headlines showing his core base of white men, hey, I'm still looking out for you and fighting against the woke mob that's trying to take what you used to have. And it's all lies. It's intentional, conscious lies. It does have an impact, but we shouldn't get distracted. Like class war, billionaires against the rest of us is what's really going on. And that's what he doesn't want us talking about.
And they're using memes online to talk to their white base in explicitly white national terms. So the graphic I've pictured on the screen right now is a part of a ICE propaganda poster, and it features Uncle Sam standing before the signpost. And, it's kind of hard to see, but it says opportunity, homeland, and service pointing in one direction, and invasion and cultural decline pointing in the other. And in his hand is a broken off sign labeled law and order. And the caption of this post is "Which way, American man?" Now, that may not sound like anything in particular, but "Which Way, Western Man" is the title of a 1978 book penned by the white nationalist William Gailey Simpson, promoting the classic conspiracy theory about Jewish cabals in control of global institutions, and it also supported eugenics, segregation, and deportation. This follows a July 1st post on the DHS website showing a Thomas Kincaid painting of a small 1950s town with the caption, "Protect the Homeland," which, by the way, Kincaid's estate put out a statement condemning the use of his art to promote division and xenophobia. There was another one on July 14th from that account, flirting even more closely with white nationalist language, showing a painting depicting a young 19th century couple in a covered wagon craning over an infant The plains and mountains extending into the distance, and the caption says, "Remember your homeland's heritage." The implication being that American heritage is one of white pioneers striking out across the West and not of any indigenous populations already there. The most overtly white nationalist post came on July 23rd when DHS shared a painting from 19th century artist John Gast featuring a white robed woman floating over a U.S. landscape, an embodiment of the concept of manifest destiny, which was a policy used to justify the genocide of Native Americans. The painting, American Progress, shows white Americans literally bringing light to the West, with Native Americans huddling in the dark on the left side of the painting as civilization spreads via stagecoaches and wagons. The caption read, "A heritage to be proud of, a homeland worth defending." And finally, in the memes front, there's an ICE recruiting video that just came out recently, which uses a script that looks awfully lot like Fraktur, the very font used in Hitler's original Mein Kampf. The White House responded to criticism with spokesperson Abigail Jackson declaring, quote, "The administration won't apologize for posting banger memes." Ryleigh, that's in your generation's dialect. Are these kind of memes working on the kids?
Yeah. I tend not to associate myself with people who would appreciate the types of memes that the White House is posting. So I think that there is power in political cartoons. There always have been. There is power in memes and in giving humor to current situations. However, I think it's extremely dangerous to normalize the kinds of things that the White House is posting. It's gross, quite frankly. We're supposed to be a city on a hill, a beacon of hope for people to look towards, and for us to be posting these kinds of things and memifying our government is entirely shameful, whether it's working or not on people my age, but it's just gross all around.
Yeah, well, if it's not going to work on people your age, they want to get to the people even younger than you. So, this one from American Prospect. So, we talked about this recently, that the Corporation for Public Broadcast is shutting down, and that is the organization that largely funds PBS and NPR. So, a lot of us know PBS from growing up and watching Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers and Word Girl and Clifford the Big Red Dog and all that good stuff, right? Well, if that might be going away, stepping into that void might be PragerU. So, PragerU is an ideologically conservative network that posts right-wing propaganda. Let's call it what it is. They were originally supported by fracking billionaires Dan and Ferris Wilks out of Texas, who have donated millions to far-right political initiatives, including the Daily Wire. Its most controversial project is PragerU Kids, an educational programming initiative that produces content for kids as young as 3. Although it is marketed as the leading network offering educational, entertaining, and pro-America content for students of all ages, PragerU Kids has a very specific point of view. And I don't know, Jesse, have you seen the one going around from PragerU where they are showing the 2 kids getting a history lesson from Frederick Douglass?
I haven't, but I've seen some of their other stuff. But yeah, go on about that one.
Well, so, basically, they make Frederick Douglass a slavery apologist. Yeah. He says, well, listen, I'm not okay with slavery, but, abolishing slavery wasn't nearly as important as the 13 colonies coming together and forming the United States of America, and that was the real great thing. They've done ones with Booker T. Washington. They've got a Columbus apology skit that is great. Listen, it's bad enough the kind of historical education we have in this country now. If PragerU becomes more prevalent, I fear for our lives.
Yeah, I mean, so I was familiar with PragerU, not with that particular horrific thing. It's like, what to the slave is the 4th of July? Awesome, that's what. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's no big deal.
Totally.
Is what, yeah.
Totally ahistorical, obviously. And yeah, I think it's interesting that, again, I think this is an issue that Trump does not give two craps about, right? You know, he wants to have totally age inappropriate women standing at his arm and for him to look good and for everybody to love and applaud him. I think that he just like allows this kind of stuff to go on because then he's got billionaires with a bunch of money who are in his corner and who are telling him how great he is, right? So I think anybody who has billions of dollars could probably get him to support some wild schemes. Or even if you don't have billions of dollars but just have cultural cachet, you could look at the Make America Healthy Again crap. And it's just like, oh, here's a sycophant for me who will bring in a new group of people into my base. Like Trump is like the McDonald's spokesperson. He is obviously not at all concerned with the sort of health stuff that Robert Kennedy is talking about, but he just is smart enough to just like let people run with their ridiculous culture war stuff so that he has people in his corner backing him up. And so he's allowing, you know, some very dangerous far-right people to be bedfellows, not, I think, because he has any vested interest in, you know, like these ideological positions, but just because he doesn't care either way. It's all a game to him. And this way, people will fund his reelection and fund corruption to just literally put money into his pocket. So does that make it less dangerous? No, not at all. I think it makes it more likely that when Trump, who is our oldest and obviously senile and obviously decaying in front of our eyes president ever, when he inevitably dies, which will happen soon, I think it opens the door for someone who actually cares about this stuff and won't just be letting it happen, but will be aggressively pushing for it to happen to escalate even further, which feels impossible right now. But I think we could look a year ago, and I think, you know, the most fearful people about the Trump presidency did not think so much of this crap would happen so quickly. So dangerous stuff for sure.
Yeah, dangerous stuff, and really they give the game away. And Leslie, I want to give you this last thing here today. So we recently saw a feature profile of the pastor Doug Wilson. This guy's based out of Moscow, Idaho, and he is the leader of something called the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches, an arch-conservative network of Christian congregations that ascribes to strict 16th century Calvinist reform ideology, putting a heavy emphasis on an all-powerful God who has dominion over all of society. This is something I've talked about on my podcast before, regarding like the charismatic movement and the Seven Mountains Mandate, and the Christian nationalists aiming to take control of all 7 spheres of cultural influence. And these are sort of the spheres of influence we've been talking about here in this segment. Well, this Wilson guy is a mentor to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. And Pete Hegseth attends one of the CREC churches in Tennessee. And Wilson most recently came under fire for telling the AP he believes the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote was a bad idea. As a woman, how does that make you feel?
Well, I think it's just absolutely ridiculous. Every single human being on this planet was born of a woman. And to try to marginalize us is really cutting off your own nose to spite yourself. And, you know, I mean, I've said for many years, let's look to other sentient species like elephants that are matriarchies. You know, they are led by women. And I truly believe we're in the upside down because women have been, you know, men have been at war with women. It really started with the Catholic Church in the 300 ADs, which was outlined in a book, The Immortality Key. It was actually a very small part of that book. It was actually about something else. But over the course of, I don't know how many years, the Catholic Church basically was responsible for the murder of 30,000 women who were influential. And it is just absolutely a tragedy. Women are every bit as intelligent and capable as men. And I can't imagine why any man would want to put women down and not want them to be their equal. There's something seriously wrong with the psychology that espouses that. It's about power. And the women who support this, I just think that's, I don't know, do they not have equality in their own home and they've been so beaten down that they think that's the way it's supposed to be? I think true equality is definitely more freeing. And, women should not be accepting this gaslighting that we deserve a second place. And women should all unite. If women would unite and really agree on equality for women, things would change rapidly. And that's really where we need to go.
You said it. We're living in the upside down. We've been doing things wrong this whole time. Patriarchy. I'm over it. I, for one, would welcome my female overlords. Or maybe that's over ladies. Listen, we are really long today, so I want to go ahead and get out of here. But before we do, I want to give each of you a chance to shamelessly promote yourself. Leslie, where can the people find you?
Well, I have my own website, leslienuss.com. I did make a video for my new song, Ticket to Mars, which features a segment where you were generous and we were able to recreate this whole feeling of the podcast. I would just say I'm on Blue Sky, and I've got my political Nuss for Us on Facebook still. But you can listen to my music on any streaming platform. And anyway, keep it up, keep your brain open and, stay in this fight. We need you.
Thank you, Leslie. Ryleigh, where can the good people find you?
I'm just going to direct to the main 5051 organization. We'll be at the State House on September 1st from 12 to 3 p.m. Doing another one of our rallies. 5051 is under entirely new leadership, so we're very excited to come back strong.
All right. We're excited for said new leadership. Jesse, how about you?
Yeah, you can find me personally at Jesse for Indy on most socials or at Naptown J Brown on TikTok. But more importantly, join DSA. So Democratic Socialists of America, famously where Zohran Mamdani came from. AOC is a member, although we're arguing with her about Iron Dome stuff right now. Rashida Tlaib is one of our proud members. I think it's the future of economic populism combined with not cultural warfare, but taking it seriously. So please join dsausa.org for more information. I said some controversial stuff today, so I would love if people argued with me about it online. It's one of my favorite things to hear people out. So look forward to getting some comments, and we'll respond in good faith to all of them.
Excellent. We look forward to that. And you can find me at all the social media at HoosLeft now, though on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads, that is at HoosLeft.us. Also, hey, be sure you're subscribed to Project Next Media, and that's at Project Next Movement on most of their social media sites. Please check us out. Also, I will be live from Camp Atterbury here in just a little bit. I'm taking off immediately after this thread, headed over there for an anti-ICE protest. I will be streaming that on TikTok Live. That is at HoosLeft over there. So if you can't make it, and if you're in central Indiana, try to make it. But if you can't, I will be on TikTok. But in the meantime, on behalf of my guests, Leslie Nuss, Ryleigh Beckett, and Jesse Brown, this has been Who's Left this week. Until next time, love each other, Indiana.
Thanks.
Thank you.